The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called within hours of the Starward Reach's return to civilized space. Representatives from every major species sat in the great chamber on the neutral world of Concordia, their faces showing emotions that ranged from disbelief to shame to profound sorrow. Chancellor Dong-Ha of the Valtheran Republic stood at the central podium, his usually composed demeanor shaken by what he had learned. Behind him, holographic displays showed the images that Commander Kang Ho's team had brought back from the Terminus sector. The silent installations, the desperate final messages, and the undeniable evidence of humanity's ultimate sacrifice. Fellow representatives, Chancellor Dong-Ha began, his voice carrying across the vast chamber, "We are gathered here to confront a truth that will change how we understand our place in the galaxy. For 500 years we have lived in peace and prosperity, believing ourselves to be safe from external threats. We were wrong." The chamber remained silent as he activated the first set of images. The human defensive installations appeared in perfect detail, their massive size and obvious military purpose clear to everyone present. An entire species, calling themselves humans, discovered a threat approaching our galaxy from the void between stars. Instead of fleeing or seeking help, they made a choice that defies understanding. They evacuated their entire civilization to the galaxy's edge and spent 5 centuries holding back an enemy that would have destroyed all of us. Representative Su Bin of the warrior culture Rendari was the first to speak. Her people had built their entire society around concepts of honor and military achievement, but even she struggled to comprehend what the humans had done. "Chancellor, my people have studied warfare for thousands of years. We understand sacrifice and military duty, but what you are describing is beyond anything in our history. An entire species chose extinction to protect strangers. How is such a thing possible?" Dr. Heywan stepped forward from her position with the Scientific Advisory Board. In the weeks since their return, she had worked tirelessly to translate more of the human records and piece together their story. Representative Subin, the humans did not see us as strangers. Their cultural records show that they believed all intelligent life was precious and worth protecting. They had a concept they called the family of consciousness, the idea that every thinking being in the universe was connected by their ability to understand existence itself. She activated another display, showing translated excerpts from human philosophical and cultural texts. The words were simple but profound, expressing ideas about duty, compassion, and the responsibility of the strong to protect the weak. They believed that consciousness was the universe's way of understanding itself. To allow any thinking species to be destroyed would diminish the universe as a whole. So when they detected the approaching threat, they never even considered abandoning us to our fate. The representative of the Etherian Collective, a being called Ju Wan who communicated through harmonic vibrations, created sounds that translated as deep mourning. Among their people, the loss of any consciousness was considered a tragedy that affected all reality. "The sorrow is beyond measure," Juwan's translation device rendered their communication. "An entire branch of consciousness has been cut from the tree of existence, and we knew nothing of their sacrifice. How do we live with such ignorance?" But it was Lord Regent Kehoe of the Hegemon Empire who raised the question that everyone was thinking but no one wanted to ask. His species had built their culture around concepts of superiority and dominance, believing themselves to be the galaxy's natural leaders. "Chancellor, you say these humans tried to contact us for help. Where is the evidence of this communication? Why do we have no records of their requests for assistance?" The chamber fell silent as Dr. Heywan activated the most damning evidence they had found. Communication logs from the human archives, showing desperate messages sent toward the inner galaxy over a period of 50 years. Requests for aid, offers to share defensive technology, and increasingly desperate pleas for someone, anyone, to acknowledge their existence. "The messages are all here, Lord Regent," Dr. Heywan said quietly. "The humans sent thousands of communications toward our space. They offered to share their technology, requested supplies and reinforcements, and begged for help in holding the line against the approaching threat. But we have no records of receiving such messages," Kehoe protested. "No, we do not," Chancellor Dong-Ha admitted, "because our communication protocols automatically filtered out signals from species not in the galactic database. The human messages were classified as primitive alien chatter and deleted without translation or analysis. The weight of that revelation settled over the chamber like a physical force. For 50 years, Humanity had been calling for help while fighting alone at the galaxy's edge. Their messages had reached the inner worlds, but no one had bothered to listen. Navigator Boram, now wearing the uniform of a senior officer, stepped forward to present the tactical analysis she had prepared. Representatives, our study of the human defensive network shows that it was designed to be operated by multiple species working together. They built it to accommodate different types of beings, different technologies, and different military doctrines. They were planning for the day when help would arrive. She activated a detailed schematic of one of the installations, highlighting sections clearly designed for non-human species. Living quarters with different atmospheric requirements, control interfaces adapted for various hand configurations, and weapon systems that could be operated by beings with different sensory capabilities. They never gave up hope that we would come to help them, she continued. Even after decades of silence from the inner galaxy, they continued to design their defenses as if we might arrive at any moment. They died believing that we were good, people who would come to their aid if we only knew they existed. The Karathi engineer Taimin presented the final piece of evidence that completed the picture of human sacrifice, power consumption records, supply manifests, and population data that told the story of an entire civilization slowly consuming itself to maintain their vigil. The numbers are clear, he said. The humans began with a population of approximately 10 billion beings spread across dozens of worlds. Over 500 years, they gradually converted their entire society into a military force dedicated to maintaining the defensive network. He showed population charts that tracked the slow decline of human numbers as generations passed, not from enemy action, but from the simple mathematics of total mobilization. Every human had been born, raised, and trained for the single purpose of maintaining their species' watch at the galaxy's edge. By the end, there were fewer than 1 million humans left, operating installations designed for billions. They were running the entire network with skeleton crews, pushing themselves beyond all reasonable limits to keep the defenses active. What happened to the threat they were fighting? Asked Representative Mirayan of the Silicon Brotherhood. If they held the line for 500 years, surely they must have defeated whatever was approaching our galaxy. The question everyone had been dreading was finally spoken aloud. Chancellor Dongha looked to Commander Kang Ho, who had remained silent during most of the session. Commander, please share what your deep space sensors detected after you left the terminus sector. Kang Ho stood slowly, his face showing the strain of carrying knowledge that no one wanted to hear. Representatives, our long-range sensors detected massive objects moving in the intergalactic void. The threat the humans died to contain is still out there, and it appears to be approaching our galaxy once again. The chamber erupted in voices as representatives from dozens of species began talking at once. Fear, disbelief, and desperate questions filled the air as the full scope of their situation became clear. How long do we have? Subin demanded. Based on the sensor data, approximately 2 years before the first objects reached the terminus sector, Kang Ho replied. Can we activate the human defensive network? Unknown. The installations appear to be intact, but they have been dormant for over a century. We would need to learn how to operate technology that took the humans decades to perfect. Chancellor Dongha raised his hand for silence. Representatives, we face a choice that will define us for all time. We can flee deeper into the galaxy and hope the threat passes us by, or we can take up the watch that humanity began and continue their defense of all intelligent life. The vote, when it came, was unanimous. Every species, every world, every representative chose to honor humanity's sacrifice by continuing their vigil. They would go to the terminus sector, learn to operate the human defensive network, and stand guard against the darkness between the stars. As the session ended and representatives began making plans for the greatest mobilization in galactic history, Dr. Haywan activated one final holographic message. It was a simple recording left by a human soldier whose name translated as Private Hyunwoo. If someone finds this message, it means we are gone and you are taking our place on the wall. Do not mourn for us too much. We chose this duty willingly, and we are proud to have served beside the greatest warriors in the galaxy, even if we never met you face to face. The airlock opened with a soft hiss and Kang Ho stepped into the unknown installation. Emergency lighting cast long shadows down empty corridors that stretched further than their lights could reach. The air tasted stale but breathable, carrying a faint metallic smell that reminded him of old battleships. Dr. Haiwan followed close behind, her scanning equipment already active. "The internal structure is remarkable," she said quietly. "The walls are made from materials I cannot identify, but they are incredibly strong. This place was built to last for thousands of years." Taman moved to the nearest control panel and ran his hands over the dark surface. "The technology is completely foreign to me. These control interfaces are designed for beings with hands similar to ours. But the symbols and language are unlike anything in the galactic database." The corridors were wide enough for several people to walk side by side, with high ceilings that suggested the builders were roughly the same size as most galactic species. But everything felt empty and lifeless, like walking through a tomb that had been sealed for centuries. "This way," Boram called from ahead. Her navigator training had taught her to read the layout of ships and stations quickly. "I think I found the command center." They followed her down a main corridor that led to the heart of the installation. Along the way, they passed dozens of smaller rooms and chambers. Some appeared to be living quarters with furniture that looked almost familiar. Others contained equipment that was clearly advanced technology, but nothing was active. The command center was a vast circular room with control stations arranged in concentric rings around a central display area. Even in the dim emergency lighting, they could see that this was where important decisions had been made. The central display showed a three-dimensional map of local space, but it was dark and inactive. "Look at this," Dr. Haiwan said, approaching one of the control stations. "There are personal items here. Pictures, small objects, things that people would keep to remember their homes and families." She held up a small rectangular object that appeared to show images of beings who looked remarkably similar to the galactic norm. They had 2 arms, 2 legs, and faces that expressed emotions everyone could recognize. In the pictures, they were smiling, embracing, and clearly showing affection for each other. "They look so much like us," Boram said softly. "I wonder what they called themselves." Taman had been working on the power systems and managed to activate some of the basic functions. Lights came on throughout the command center, and several of the control stations began to hum quietly. "I think I can access their data storage systems," he said. "But the language and formatting are completely unknown." "Wait," Dr. Haiwan said, moving to a different control station. "I am detecting something here. This appears to be some kind of communication system." She worked with the controls for several minutes before managing to activate a holographic display. Text appeared in the air above the station, written in symbols none of them could read. But as they watched, the display changed, showing what appeared to be star charts and tactical information. The images were clear enough to understand even without knowing the language. "These are defensive positions," Kang Ho realized. "Look at the way the installations are arranged. They were not just protecting this area. They were protecting everything behind them." The star charts showed the galaxy they all knew, but from a perspective none of them had ever seen before. The defensive installations were positioned at the galaxy's edge, forming a barrier between their home systems and the empty space beyond. Taman managed to access more data files, and slowly they began to piece together what had happened here. The text was still unreadable, but the images told a clear story. The builders of these installations had detected something coming from outside the galaxy, something that threatened all life within it. "Boram, look at this," Dr. Haiwan called. She had found a data file that showed movement patterns in the space beyond the galaxy's edge. Whatever they were watching for, it was huge. Multiple objects, each one larger than entire star systems. The young navigator studied the data carefully. "Commander, if these readings are accurate, the objects they detected were moving toward our galaxy at significant speed. Based on the trajectory information, they would have reached the outer systems about 500 years ago. But nothing reached the outer systems 500 years ago," Kang Ho said. "The outer colonies have been peaceful for centuries. There are no records of any major threats from outside the galaxy." "Maybe," Taman said quietly, "that is because these people stopped them." As if responding to his words, the main display in the center of the command center suddenly activated. A holographic figure appeared showing one of the beings from the pictures they had found. This one was clearly a military officer, wearing what appeared to be a uniform with symbols of rank and authority. The figure began to speak, but the language was still incomprehensible. However, the display also showed images that helped explain what was being said. The speaker was showing them the threat that had been detected, the defensive preparations that had been made, and the final battle that had taken place. Dr. HFY worked frantically with her translation equipment, trying to decode at least some of the language. After an hour of work, she managed to translate a few key phrases. "The speaker's name appears to be Admiral Ye Jin," she said. "And I think I understand some of what she is saying. She is talking about holding a position, about protecting something precious behind them." The holographic message continued, showing images of the defensive network at full activation, weapons that could destroy entire fleets, shields that could protect whole star systems, and thousands of installations working together in perfect coordination. It had been the most powerful military force in galactic history, but the images also showed the cost. One by one, the installations had gone dark, not from enemy action, but from simple exhaustion. Their power systems had run out, their weapons had been depleted, and their crews had reached the limits of endurance. They knew they were going to lose, Boram said quietly. "Look at these final images." They knew they could not win permanently, but they fought anyway. Taemin found another data file that made everything clear. It showed power consumption charts and supply records. The entire defensive network had been designed with a specific operational lifespan, exactly 500 years. Every installation, every weapon, every system had been built to run for that long and no longer. "This was not a civilization planning for victory," he said. "This was a civilization planning for sacrifice." Dr. HFY managed to translate more of the text, and what she found made her voice shake with emotion. "Commander, they called themselves humans. They came from a world called Earth, in a star system that was completely evacuated to build this defensive network. An entire species gave up their home to protect strangers," Kang Ho said slowly. "They moved their entire civilization to the galaxy's edge and spent 500 years holding back something that would have destroyed all of us." The holographic message was reaching its conclusion. Admiral Ye Jin raised her hand in what was clearly a salute, and spoke words that Dr. HFY translated with tears in her eyes. "We know we cannot win. We know no one will come to help us, but we also know that behind us lies everything worth protecting. We go now to our watch and we will not break." The message ended, leaving the command center in silence. The four explorers stood in the darkness, surrounded by the evidence of the greatest sacrifice in galactic history. An entire species had died alone and unknown, protecting people who had never even known they existed. "We have to tell the galaxy about this," Kang Ho said finally. "Every world, every species, every person needs to know what these humans did for all of us." But even as he spoke, he wondered how he could possibly find words to describe what they had discovered. How do you tell an entire galaxy that they owe their existence to strangers who died protecting them? How do you honor a sacrifice so vast that it defied comprehension? As they prepared to leave the installation and return to their ship, none of them noticed the faint energy readings coming from the deep space monitoring equipment. Something was moving in the darkness beyond the galaxy's edge, something that had been waiting for the human defensive network to finally fall silent. The humans had bought the galaxy 500 years of peace and prosperity, but their vigil was over, and the threat they had died to contain was stirring once again. Admiral Kang Ho stood in the command center of Installation Prime, the largest of the human defensive platforms, and watched as the final preparations for battle were completed around him. 6 months had passed since the breakthrough with the human training materials, and the great defensive network was now operating at nearly full capacity. The bridge around him buzzed with activity as beings from a dozen different species worked side by side at control stations designed by humans who had died centuries ago. Karathi engineers monitored power systems, Zephyrian tacticians coordinated fleet movements, and Rendari warriors prepared weapon systems that could destroy entire enemy formations. But what struck Kang Ho most was how naturally everyone had adapted to working with human technology. The training materials had done more than teach them to operate alien machines. They had taught them to think like humans, to understand the values and beliefs that had motivated humanity's ultimate sacrifice. "Admiral, long-range sensors are detecting the Devourer Vanguard," reported Captain Nari from her position at the sensor array. "Estimated contact in 6 hours." Through the main viewing port, Kang Ho could see the assembled fleet that would face the approaching threat. Nearly 10,000 ships from every world in the galaxy, supported by hundreds of reactivated human installations. It was the largest military force in galactic history, but he knew it might not be enough. The Devourers were creatures of unimaginable power, each one capable of consuming the life force of entire star systems. The human records described them as beings of pure hunger, existing only to feed on the energy that powered living worlds. For 500 years, humanity had held them back through determination and sacrifice. Now it was the galaxy's turn to continue that vigil. Admiral, incoming transmission from the Etherian meditation ship, announced Communications Officer Boram. They are reporting successful completion of the consciousness link. This was something new, something that humanity had never tried during their long watch. The Etherian Collective had proposed linking the minds of all fleet personnel through their natural telepathic abilities, creating a shared consciousness that would allow perfect coordination during battle. All stations, prepare for consciousness integration, Kang Ho announced. Throughout the fleet, beings from dozens of species opened their minds to each other, sharing thoughts, emotions, and determination in a way that had never been attempted before. The effect was immediate and profound. Kang Ho could feel the presence of every other mind in the fleet, their courage strengthening his own, their determination becoming part of his soul. But more than that, he could sense something else in the shared consciousness. The lingering presence of the humans who had built these installations, their memories and values somehow preserved in the technology they had created. "We are not alone," he said quietly, and every being in the fleet understood what he meant. The humans were still with them, their courage and sacrifice living on in the hearts of those who had taken up their watch. The first Devourer appeared on the sensors as a massive shadow against the stars, its form defying easy description. It was partly energy and partly matter, shifting between states as it moved through space. Behind it came others, each one radiating hunger and malevolent intelligence. "All stations, prepare for engagement," Kang Ho ordered. "Remember what we learned from the human records. These creatures feed on life force, but they can be hurt by focused energy weapons and contained by properly configured shield barriers." The battle began with the activation of the humans' long-range weapons, massive energy cannons that fired beams of concentrated stellar fire across impossible distances. The first Devourer was caught by surprise, its form writhing as the human weapons tore into its energy matrix. But the creature did not die. Instead, it began to adapt, its form shifting to better absorb and deflect the incoming fire. The other Devourers spread out, approaching the defensive line from multiple angles while learning from their companions' experience. "They are adapting faster than the human records indicated," reported Chief Tactical Officer Subin. "We need to change our strategy." This was where the consciousness link proved its worth. Instead of waiting for orders to filter down through the command structure, every ship and installation in the fleet acted as one, changing tactics and weapon frequencies in perfect coordination. When the Devourers adapted to one type of attack, the defenders immediately switched to another. The battle raged for hours, with neither side able to gain a decisive advantage. The Devourers were incredibly powerful and adaptable, but the combined fleet had advantages that humanity had never possessed. Multiple species meant multiple approaches to warfare, dozens of different technologies working together, and most importantly, the shared consciousness that allowed perfect coordination. It was during the height of the battle that engineer Min-Ho made a discovery that changed everything. While monitoring the power systems of Installation Prime, he noticed that the human technology was responding to the shared consciousness in unexpected ways. "Admiral, the human systems are interfacing with our consciousness link," he reported excitedly. "I think they were designed to do this. The humans built their technology to be operated not just by individuals, but by collective consciousness." As if responding to his words, the installation systems began operating with efficiency and power that far exceeded anything they had achieved during training. Weapons fired with perfect accuracy, shields coordinated seamlessly with fleet movements, and tactical systems anticipated enemy actions with uncanny precision. "The humans knew," Dr. Haywan said in wonder. "They knew that someday other species would take up their watch, and they designed their technology to work with whatever form of collective consciousness we might develop." The tide of battle turned as the full power of the human defensive network was unleashed. Installations that had been operating at partial capacity suddenly blazed with energy, their weapons reaching power levels that the records had claimed were theoretical maximums. Shield barriers that had flickered uncertainly now stood like unbreachable walls against the Devourer assault. But the greatest moment came when the consciousness link connected not just with human technology, but with the memories and experiences that humanity had somehow embedded within their installations. For a brief, shining moment, every being in the fleet experienced what it had been like to be human. They felt the desperate courage of Admiral Ye Jin as she made the final decision to sacrifice everything for strangers she would never meet. They shared the quiet determination of Private Hunwoo as he stood watch during the long, lonely years at the galaxy's edge. They experienced the love and hope that had motivated an entire species to choose extinction over abandoning their duty. Armed with that understanding, the galaxy's defenders fought with a fury and determination that matched humanity's own. The Devourers, for the first time in eons, found themselves facing beings who would not break, would not flee, and would not abandon their post no matter what the cost. The battle ended not with the destruction of the Devourers, but with their retreat. Faced with defenders who fought with human courage and determination, the cosmic predators withdrew into the darkness between galaxies, seeking easier prey elsewhere in the universe. As the last enemy signature disappeared from the sensors, a profound silence settled over the fleet. They had won, but the victory belonged as much to the dead humans as to the living defenders. All stations stand down from combat alert, Kang Ho ordered, but maintain watch rotations. The Devourers may return and we must be ready. In the weeks that followed, the galaxy's leaders gathered to plan for the future. The defensive network would be maintained permanently, with rotating crews from every world taking turns at the galaxy's edge. The watch that humanity had begun would continue forever, passed down from generation to generation as a sacred trust. But more than that, humanity's sacrifice had changed the galaxy in fundamental ways. The consciousness link that had been developed for battle became a permanent connection between worlds, allowing species to understand each other in ways that had never been possible before. Wars became unthinkable when you could feel your enemy's pain as your own. Prejudice and hatred withered when you could experience life through another being's perspective. The monument to humanity was built not on any world, but in space itself, at the exact center of the defensive network. It was a simple structure, just a crystalline spire that contained the complete records of human history, culture, and sacrifice. But it was visible from every installation in the network, a constant reminder of what they were protecting and why. On the monument's base were engraved words that had been found in the personal quarters of countless human soldiers, words that had apparently been important to their culture. Greater love has no one than this, than to lay down one's life for one's friends. Navigator Boram, now an old woman serving as the monument's keeper, would often stand before those words and think about the species that had called an entire galaxy their friends, without ever meeting them. The humans were gone, but their love lived on in every world they had protected, in every life they had saved, and in every defender who took up their watch. Commander Kang Ho stared at the empty star map on his screen. 3 years of traveling through the galaxy's edge and they had found nothing. Just dead space, cold rocks, and the endless black between stars. His ship, the Starward Reach, was the most advanced exploration vessel the Galactic Republic had ever built. It carried the best crew from 12 different worlds. Yet all they had to show for their mission was a collection of worthless asteroids and failed promises. Still nothing on long-range sensors. Commander. Navigator Boram's voice carried the same tired tone they all shared now. She was young for such an important job, barely 30 cycles old. But her people from the Silicon Brotherhood were famous for their ability to read space itself. If she said there was nothing out there, most captains would believe her without question. But Kang Ho had learned to trust his feelings more than his instruments. Something was wrong with this sector of space. It was too empty, too quiet. In 40 years of space travel, he had never seen a region so completely lifeless. Even the most barren systems usually had some trace of cosmic activity, some hint that the universe was alive and moving. Here there was only silence. Keep scanning, he told Boram. There has to be something. Dr. Haywon looked up from her research station. The xenoarchaeologist had been studying star charts for months, looking for any sign of ancient civilizations. Her green skin showed the silver markings that meant she was thinking hard about something. Among her people, the Zephyrians, those markings only appeared when they were solving difficult puzzles. Commander, I have been thinking about the quantum readings from this sector, she said. The background radiation patterns are very strange. It is almost like something large was here once, but The energy traces are too old to identify properly. Engineer Taman spoke up from his position near the engine controls. His people, the Karathi, were known throughout the galaxy for building things that lasted forever. If anyone could understand mysterious technology, it would be him. "Sir, I have been getting odd readings from our power systems too. Nothing dangerous, but the resonance frequencies keep shifting when we pass through certain areas. It is like something out there is affecting our equipment." Kang Ho nodded slowly. His crew was the best in the galaxy, and they were all telling him the same thing in different ways. This sector was not as empty as it appeared. Something had happened here. Something big enough to leave traces that could still be detected after unknown years. "How much further to the sector boundary?" he asked. 2 days at current speed," Boram replied. "But Commander, the Galactic Survey Office ordered us to return if we found nothing by the boundary marker. Our supplies are running low and we have been out here longer than any previous expedition." That was true. The Starward Reach had been designed for long missions, but 3 years was pushing even its advanced systems to their limits. The crew was tired, homesick, and ready to return to their families. Kang Ho understood their feelings, but something inside him refused to give up. "We will continue to the boundary," he decided. "If we find nothing there, we will turn back and report our findings to the Council." The next day brought the first real excitement they had felt in months. Ensign Wu Jin, one of the junior officers monitoring the sensor array, suddenly called out from his station. "Commander, I am picking up artificial structures ahead. Multiple contacts, very large." Everyone on the bridge turned to look at the main display screen. At first, Kang Ho saw nothing but the usual star field. Then Boram adjusted the sensors and the images appeared. Massive metal structures floated in the darkness, each one larger than the biggest space stations in the inner galaxy. They were arranged in perfect geometric patterns stretching across dozens of star systems. "By the ancient gods," Dr. Haywan whispered. "Commander, these structures are huge. Each one must be the size of a small moon." Taman was already running detailed scans on his engineering equipment. "Sir, the construction methods are completely unknown to me. The materials are registering as super-dense metals that should not be able to exist in such large quantities. Whoever built these things had technology far beyond anything in our databases." Kang Ho felt his heart racing. This was the discovery they had been hoping for, the proof that advanced civilizations existed at the galaxy's edge. But as he studied the structures more carefully, he began to notice disturbing details. "Boram, are you detecting any energy signatures from those structures?" The young navigator checked her instruments carefully before answering. "No, Commander. No power readings, no communication signals, no life signs. They appear to be completely inactive." "That cannot be right," Dr. Haywan said. "Structures that large would need massive power systems to maintain basic functions. Even if the civilization that built them was gone, there should be automatic systems running." Taman made an adjustment to his sensors and frowned at the results. "Commander, I am detecting something very strange about the arrangement of these structures. They are not random. Look at this pattern analysis." He transferred his data to the main screen and everyone could see what he meant. The structures were arranged in defensive positions, each one placed to provide maximum coverage of the space around it. They formed layers of protection, with the largest installations at the outer edge and smaller ones filling any gaps in the coverage. "It looks like a military formation," Kang Ho said slowly. "But defending against what? There is nothing out here but empty space." "Commander," Boram said quietly, "I am detecting something else. The structures extend much further than our sensors can reach. Based on the pattern, this defensive network might stretch across hundreds of star systems." The bridge fell silent as everyone considered what that meant. A defensive network spanning hundreds of systems would require the resources of an entire galactic civilization, yet whoever had built it was apparently gone, leaving behind only these silent monuments to their unknown purpose. "We need to get closer," Kang Ho decided. "Boram, take us to the nearest structure. Taman, I want full scans of everything we can reach. Dr. Haywan, prepare your archaeological equipment. We are going to board one of those installations." As the Starward Reach moved closer to the nearest structure, more details became visible. The installation was definitely artificial, covered with weapon ports, sensor arrays, and docking facilities. It had been built for war, designed to fight against something that required massive firepower to stop. But what struck Kang Ho most was the condition of the structure. Despite showing no signs of recent activity, it appeared to be in perfect repair. No damage from combat, no signs of decay or abandonment. It looked like its crew had simply turned off the lights and walked away yesterday. "Commander," Dr. HFY said softly, "I'm picking up some very faint energy traces from inside the structure. Not enough to power major systems, but possibly enough to keep basic life support and data storage active." "Is it safe to board?" "The atmosphere readings are breathable for most of our crew. The artificial gravity appears to be functioning at minimal levels. I would say it is safe, but we should be prepared for anything." Kang Ho looked around at his crew. They were scientists and explorers, not soldiers, but they had come this far together. Whatever mysteries lay inside that installation, they would face them as a team. "Prepare an away team," he ordered. "We are going to find out who built these structures and what happened to them." As the Starward Reach docked with the silent installation, none of them could imagine that they were about to uncover the greatest tragedy and the most noble sacrifice in galactic history. The answers they found would change everything they thought they knew about courage, duty, and the true cost of protecting others. Captain Nari stood on the bridge of the research vessel Deep Explorer, watching as the largest fleet in galactic history assembled around the human installations. Ships from every major species filled the space between the silent, defensive platforms, their crews working frantically to understand technology that had died with its creators. 2 months had passed since the Galactic Council's unanimous decision to take up humanity's vigil, and progress had been slower than anyone hoped. The human installations were marvels of engineering, but they were also completely alien to everyone trying to operate them. "Captain, I am getting another power surge from Installation Delta 7, reported Chief Engineer Min Ho, a young genius from the Zephyrian Collective who had volunteered for the most dangerous assignment in the galaxy. "The reactor systems keep rejecting our control inputs. It is like the technology is waiting for something we do not understand." Nari nodded grimly. They had managed to restore basic power to about 30% of the human network, but actually operating the weapons and defensive systems remained beyond their abilities. The humans had built their technology around concepts and principles that no other species had ever developed. "What about the cultural analysis team?" she asked. "Have they made any progress with the human databases?" Dr. HFY looked up from her research station, where she had been working nonstop for weeks to decode human technical manuals. "Captain, I think I understand the problem. Human technology is not just based on engineering principles. It is integrated with their cultural and philosophical concepts in ways that make no sense to us." She activated a holographic display showing a human technical manual. The pages were filled not just with technical specifications and operating procedures, but with what appeared to be inspirational quotes, historical references, and philosophical discussions about duty and sacrifice. "Look at this manual for operating their primary weapon systems," she continued. The technical instructions are mixed with lessons about human military history, stories about ancient warriors, and philosophical discussions about the morality of warfare. To operate the weapons properly, you need to understand not just how they work, but why the humans built them and what they represent. Linguist So Young, who had been studying human cultural records, added her own findings. Dr. HFY is correct. Human technology appears to require what they called contextual understanding. Their machines were designed to be operated by beings who shared their cultural values and emotional responses. "That is impossible," protested Engineer Taman from his position at the power control station. "Technology is technology. Weapons fire, shields activate, engines provide thrust. These are physical processes that do not depend on philosophy or culture." "For us, yes," So Young replied. "But humans designed their technology differently. They built machines that responded not just to technical commands, but to the operator's understanding of human concepts like duty, honor, sacrifice, and love." Captain Nari felt a chill as she understood what that meant. "You are saying we cannot operate their defenses because we are not human?" "Not exactly," Dr. HFY said quickly. "I think we can learn to operate them, but we need to understand human culture as deeply as we understand their technology. We need to think like humans, feel like humans, and understand the universe the way they did." The conversation was interrupted by an urgent alert from the long-range sensor station. Ensign Wu Jin's voice carried across the bridge with barely controlled panic. "Captain, I'm detecting movement in the deep void. Multiple massive objects approaching at high speed. Nari moved quickly to the sensor station and studied the readings herself. What she saw made her blood run cold. Dozens of enormous shapes were moving through the darkness between galaxies, each one larger than entire star systems. They were still far away, but they were definitely approaching the galaxy. "How long until they reach us?" she asked. "Based on current velocity, approximately 18 months, Wu Jin replied. "But Captain, these readings do not make sense. The objects appear to be biological in nature, but they are far too large to be any form of natural life." Nari activated the fleet communication system and connected to Admiral Kang Ho, who was coordinating the defense efforts from the largest human installation. "Admiral, we have confirmation of the approaching threat. Multiple objects, approximately 40 in number. Biological signatures. Estimated arrival in 18 months. Kang Ho's voice came through clearly despite the interference from the human technology surrounding his position. "Understood, Captain. We need to accelerate our efforts to bring the defensive network online. How much progress has your team made with the cultural analysis?" "Some, but not enough. Dr. Haywan believes we need to understand human culture as deeply as their technology, but that could take years we do not have." "Then we find another way," Kang Ho said firmly. "Keep working on the cultural approach, but also look for any shortcuts or alternative methods the humans might have left for us." Over the following days, teams of researchers worked around the clock to find some way to activate the human defenses. They tried brute force technical approaches, attempted to bypass the cultural requirements entirely, and even brought in psychologists to help them understand human emotional responses. Nothing worked. The human installations remained mostly dormant, their most powerful weapons and defensive systems locked behind barriers that required not just technical knowledge, but genuine understanding of human values and beliefs. It was Minho who made the breakthrough that changed everything. While studying the personal quarters of a human installation, he found a collection of what appeared to be training materials designed for children. "Look at this," he called to his research team. "These are not technical manuals. They are stories, games, and simple lessons designed to teach human children about their culture and values." Dr. Haywan examined the materials carefully. They were beautifully crafted, with simple illustrations and easy-to-understand language that explained complex human concepts through stories and examples. "This is it," she said excitedly. The humans knew that their children would need to understand both the technology and the culture to operate the defenses. These materials teach both at the same time. The training materials told stories of human heroes who had faced impossible odds to protect others. They explained concepts like courage, sacrifice, and duty through simple tales that any child could understand. But mixed in with the stories were technical lessons about operating the defensive systems. "It is brilliant," Minho said in admiration. They created a teaching system that would produce operators who understood both the engineering and the philosophy behind their technology. Within hours, copies of the human training materials were distributed to every ship in the fleet. Adults from dozens of species began studying lessons designed for human children, learning not just how to operate alien technology, but how to think like the beings who had created it. The breakthrough came when a young Karathi engineer named G1 successfully activated a primary weapons system for the first time. She had spent days studying human stories about protective love, about parents who would do anything to keep their children safe. "I was thinking about my own daughter back home," she explained to the cheering research team. "I imagined her threatened by something terrible, and I felt the same desperate need to protect her that the humans must have felt about all of us. When I touched the weapon controls with that feeling in my heart, they responded." Word spread quickly through the fleet. Other operators began having similar successes as they learned to connect emotionally with human concepts and values. Slowly, section by section, the great defensive network began to come alive. But even as celebrations broke out across the fleet, the long-range sensors continued to track the approaching threat. The objects from the void were getting closer, and their energy signatures were becoming clearer. "Captain," Ensign Wu Jin reported during one of the daily briefings, "I am detecting energy patterns from the approaching objects that match descriptions in the human databases. These appear to be the same entities that the humans called devourers." Nari studied the sensor data and felt her heart sink. The objects were not ships or artificial constructs. They were living beings, each one a creature of unimaginable size and power that fed on the life force of entire worlds. The humans had not been fighting an invasion force or a hostile civilization. They had been holding back cosmic predators that viewed the galaxy as nothing more than a feeding ground. "How many worlds will they consume if they reach the inner galaxy?" she asked quietly. Wu Jin consulted his calculations before answering. "All of them, Captain. Based on the human records, the Devourers will not stop until every living thing in the galaxy has been consumed." As the implications of that revelation settled over the bridge crew, Nari made a silent promise to the long-dead humans who had fought these monsters for 500 years. The Devourers had been held back once by courage and sacrifice. They would be held back again, no matter what the cost. The greatest battle in galactic history was approaching, and this time, humanity would not fight alone.